Good evening and welcome to the July 14th, 2020 Downers Grove Village Council meeting. I'm Mayor Pro Tem Greg Jose. Bob Barnett, our mayor, could not be with us tonight, so I'll be filling in for him. I apologize in advance. Before we go any further, it is our custom to say the Pledge of Allegiance, so would you all please stand?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. For the folks that are here in council chambers, we have copies of our agenda on either side on the tables near the doors. For folks that are watching online, you can get the agenda at downers.us. Megan, could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Earl?
Here.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Here.
Commissioner Colavini?
Here.
Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Mayor Barnett?
We have a quorum. Thank you, Megan. Before we go any farther, I'd like to remind folks that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, public comment will be taken in person and electronically. To submit a comment, you can click on the Submit Public Comment link on the current week's meeting page of the village website anytime during the meeting, and we'll get that and we'll have it read during public comments, both either at the top or along the way as we deal with each agenda item. With that, can I have a motion with regard to the previous council meeting minutes?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt the council minutes as of July 7th, 2020, or for July 7th of 2020.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved unanimously. That brings us to public comments. This is the first opportunity to speak. This is for non-agenda items, so if you're here to talk about something of a general nature, please come up to the microphone and we'd love to hear from you. There not being a stampede, I will look to Deputy Village Manager Mike Baker. I know we had a couple of online comments.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, there were 3 comments that were received earlier today from residents advocating for video gaming. We also did receive one just after 6 p.m. from a resident suggesting that issuing citations for illegal fireworks could be a way to close budget gaps. That comment, the full text of that comment will be posted with an updated set of remarks comments that we'll post tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Mike. That brings us to item 5 on our agenda, that is the consent agenda. May I have a motion with regard to the consent agenda?
I move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, Megan, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavini?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. That brings us to item 6, our active agenda. Can I have a motion with regard to item A?
I move to adopt an ordinance rezoning certain property located at 4725, 4733, 4737, 4744, and 4809 Douglas, 440 and 445 Prairie, and 444 Wilson for the St. Mary of Goston Parish and School as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion from the council? Anyone from the public wish to comment? I'd just like to once again thank St. Mary of Goston on behalf of the village. They have been a fantastic organization and church here in Downers Grove, and we appreciate that they're bringing this forward and look forward to it moving with all speed. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavini?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. May I have a motion with regard to item B?
I move to adopt an ordinance adopting an institutional master plan for the property located at 4725, 4733, 4737, 4744, and 4809 Douglas, 440 and 445 Prairie, and 444 Wilson, commonly known as the St. Mary of Goston Parish and School, as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion with regard to item B? Anyone in the public? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Earl,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose.
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. That brings us to item C, an ordinance to amend liquor license renewals. Do we have a motion?
I move to adopt an ordinance amending liquor license renewals in terms as presented.
Second.
Any comments from the council? Anyone from the public? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Earl,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose.
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. That brings us to item D. Is there a motion with regard to item D?
I move to adopt an ordinance amending massage license renewals as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? Anyone in the public? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Earl,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose.
Aye. That matter also passes unanimously. That brings us to the last active agenda item, item E.
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt an ordinance making certain technical amendments to the Downers Grove Municipal Code as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? Anyone in the public care about the technical corrections? I'm sure it was very thrilling reading for everybody. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Earl,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose.
Aye. That matter also passes unanimously. And just like that, we're on to our first reading. For this, we'll be taking some information in from staff, comments from the public on an item that will be heard for the first time tonight, but will not be voted on until sometime in the future. And for this, I will turn it over to our village manager, Dave Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We have only one item on tonight's first reading agenda. It is a motion considering an award of contract to construct replacement water mains. Here to provide background information on this item is our Public Works Director, Andy Sikich, who has to do the long walk to the podium over there.
Good evening, Mr. Sikich.
Good evening. Tonight I'm here to present the water main contract. It's Contract B. It'll be the only contract for this year. Contract A was earlier this year and was canceled due to the COVID-19 situation. So this contract is to Congdon Sewer Service. It's in an amount of $1,426,526.25. It will entail water main replacements on Florence Avenue from Foxfire Court to 41st Street, Warren Avenue from Belmont to Cornell, and Puffer Road from 61st to 63rd Street. Congdon has worked in town several times and for other municipalities as well and have done a fine job. So we don't anticipate any issues, and I'd answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Kolovany.
I noticed in the last page with the bill of materials and units, there were some trees being removed. And can you tell us how many trees and if you know the caliber?
Bear with me a sec. Typically, if we're doing removals on a water main job, we do these projects to try to avoid as much tree removal as possible. Occasionally, though, because of the age of some of these water mains, you will find that people's buffalo boxes have basically grown into the trees. So that's typically why, and I apologize, I'm searching for the appropriate page.
I'm not sure it's in there, but it's something you could look up.
Yeah, I can look it up for sure. But typically, we minimize tree removals as much as possible, and that would be the only reason I could think of.
Yeah. I think last year we agreed that we could put that up front in the summary.
Okay.
So if we can just kind of move back into that, that would be useful.
Sure. No problem.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other comments or questions from members of the council? Commissioner Earl.
Just a quick comment, because this is $1,500,000. And we have been talking about how we've been worried about how revenues are coming in. We're getting ready to hear an updated long-range report, long-range financial report, but things are looking better than the worst-case scenario. And so this was something that looked like most of it needed to be done right away. And so we're going to go ahead and do it because it needs to be done. So priorities in water mains are it. So thank you. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Before I throw it to the public, I just want to echo something that Commissioner Earl said. This is a sign that things are a little bit better than we thought, which is good. And at the same time, we have to continue watching every dollar, and that's exactly what we're going to do. But we also need to make sure that we continue to invest in our infrastructure. This village knows what happens when we don't, given the condition of the roads and other infrastructure in say in 10, 12, 15 years ago. We spent an awful lot of money bringing our streets and sidewalks up to the condition where we can maintain them at the level that they should be without having to replace them, which is significantly more costly. So being able to make this investment in our community is a good thing. Any comments from the public? Any final comments, questions? Thank you.
And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fieldman. I'm going to throw it right back to you for the manager's report.
I actually have two items on tonight's manager's report. The first is a resolution making appointments to the Building Board of Appeals. So normally, in almost every case, it's the mayor who brings forth nominations for appointment, but in this case, the Building Board of Appeals, it is the duty and privilege of the village manager. So these appointments are brought forth by the manager, myself, and subject to village council approval. Now, with the Building Board of Appeals, this is a technical board, and these positions have technical requirements and credentialing. These appointments, the actual proposed appointees are in the agenda materials in your packet. I'd like to thank Stan Popovich and all the other folks in community development who actively recruited such highly qualified individuals willing to serve our community. Their contributions will be greatly appreciated. Be happy to answer any questions you may have about this resolution, and we would be appropriate to seek a motion approving this resolution.
I would like to move to approve the resolution number 2020-36, appointing members to the Building Board of Appeals as presented.
Second.
Any discussion from the council? Commissioner Colavini.
I was also impressed with the quality of the candidates for this, and because this organization rarely, if ever, meets, hopefully we might be able to use them in other boards as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavini?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The next item is the information continuing discussion of the 2019 to 2021 long-range plan update. And as I said, this is a continued discussion of the update to the long-range plan. And tonight is the second of 5 planned meetings on this topic. The long-range plan consists of the village's strategic goals, key trends and issues affecting our long-term future, strategies and solutions put in place to address those key issues, and the village council's work plan, projects and priorities to be completed by April of 2021. Now, the current long-range plan was adopted in late 2019, and we're in the process of updating it now. And this update will address key issues which have surfaced and been identified since the last time the council addressed this plan. The update will establish new strategies and solutions and determine priority action items for the next several months. Here's the schedule for the update to the long-range plan. Tonight we will introduce new key trends and issues. And please note, we have made a small change in the schedule such that the remaining meetings will take place at all of the council meetings in August. This will provide staff an additional 2 weeks to prepare the proposed strategies and solutions to address the key issues. So it just calls for us to conclude on August 18th instead of August 11th. And when you see the key issues that we've identified, you'll see why we would appreciate a couple weeks extra in formulating a response plan. So let's get right into those key issues. The village staff has identified 2 key issues. First, something we've been talking about for several months now, is revenues continue to perform poorly due to the economic downturn caused by the pandemic. It appears that the most conservative revenue projections for 2020 will result in a revenue shortfall of $9.3 million. Now that is a big number. That is very poor performance, but you may recall that just a couple of months ago, our worst case scenario projection was up to $20 million. And staff projects that revenue shortfall in 2021 could be as much as $8.3 million. The second issue that we'll talk about tonight is the unexpected dramatic increase in the required contribution to the police and fire pension funds. The contribution for 2021 will increase by about 1.2 to nearly $2 million, an increase of 15 to 22%. Going back to our first issue identified about revenue shortfall, we wanted to take a little closer look at the revenue shortfall we are experiencing in the current year in our general fund in 2020. During the first quarter of this year, village revenues were performing incredibly well and greatly exceeded our budgeted amounts. But then, beginning in the second quarter, business activities have been significantly curtailed due to the pandemic, and our revenue performance can be classified as very poor. Staff expects some improvement in revenue performance for the balance of the year, quarters 3 and 4, although it is likely to perform poorly compared to normal conditions such as our normal budgeted amounts. So the table we have up here on the screen shows 4 major revenue sources that we've been tracking and monitoring. Sales taxes and food and beverage taxes have performed better than the worst case scenario projections. You can see that through April, we have information on sales tax and home rule sales tax. Through that time, sales taxes are down about 11%. Home rule sales taxes for that period down just over 11%. Food and beverage taxes down about 21%. You may recall our worst case scenario had them tracking at 50% or less for the entire year. So hotel tax revenue has performed according to the worst case scenario. It's down 52.5% so far this year through May. Frankly, most of our major hotels are closed and will be closed for a few more months potentially. So we think that hotel taxes will continue to perform very poorly. So this graph shows the low and high revenue projections for the balance of 2020 and into 2021. And you can see that revenue for 2020 is expected to be somewhere between $40.4 million and $45.5 million. That's that shortfall of up to about $9.3 million that we just introduced. You can see that our budgeted revenues for the year were nearly $50 million at 49.7. Trying to project into 2021 is, of course, challenging and difficult given the lag time in reporting of our revenues. But based on the very recent performance we've seen, if all of 2021 performs like we've been performing in the last 30 to 45 days, revenue is expected to be somewhere between $40.8 million and $49.5 million. That would be a shortfall of about $8.3 million when you compare it to what we budgeted for this year. And that's shown graphically here. So this table actually shows how the village will respond to the revenue shortfall we just showed on the last graph. First, I want to talk about expense reductions. You may recall that we always are looking for ways to stretch our dollars and be mindful of taxpayer resources. Our plan calls for us to continue to control expenses. Good news here. Our expense reduction efforts have been very successful. We now project that the general fund expenses will be a full $3 million lower than budgeted. Our plan called for a reduction of about $1.8 million. So once you apply those expense reductions to our revenue shortfall, you end up with a financial gap or shortfall net somewhere between 1.3 and 6.3 million. Now that gap of up to $6.3 million can be addressed with the use of reserves and transfers from the capital fund and major buildings fund. You may recall that that is actually tier 3 of our multi-tier plan that we introduced back in April. So while this is not great news by any stretch, there is good news in this. And that's the last line of this table. It says ending fund balance for the general fund, 20.6 million. Fund balance, okay, reserves. This is the number we started the year with, 20.6 million. And it appears that with our updated worst case scenario, that the general fund reserves will remain at 20.6 million for 2020. So just pause there and thank every one of our staff members who've committed to expense control efforts. Their efforts are so valuable to the tax-paying members of this community. When we look ahead to 2021 with the same sort of table, just with not as much information at this point, again, revenues somewhere 41-ish to 49.5 million is our best projection at this point. Looking ahead, trying to predict what the FY21 budgeted expenses would be, somewhere between 49 and maybe up to $52 million, which would give us a worst case scenario deficit of 8.3 million. Now, the next time we meet to discuss long-range planning, we will roll out a proposed plan to address the 2021 shortfall, and that's what we're working on right now. Tonight, it's sufficient just to raise awareness of the issue itself. I wanted to then move on to the second issue we wanted to bring forward, and that has to do with the required contribution to the public safety pension levy. So we talked about revenues being negatively affected in 2021. The same goes for expenses in that year. The village's required annual contribution to the police and fire pension funds will increase by a minimum of 1.16 million and a maximum of just shy of $2 million next year. That is a 15 to 22% increase. That's the largest increase I've seen in my time here in Downers Grove. The trick here is that the vast majority of this increase was not anticipated. So what comprises this increase? So most of the increase was driven by changes in the mortality table that the actuaries use when preparing the model which calculates the required contribution. So actuaries across the nation are using a new mortality table which shows public pension fund participants living substantially longer. So that's good in terms of health and wellness, but what it translates to is an unexpected increase somewhere around the $580,000 mark for next year. The other major increase was driven by changes the state of Illinois made to the benefits for employees hired after 2011. These are known as Tier 2 employees. Tier 2 employees, that was a concept introduced by the pension reform that took place in 2011 into 2012. The state of Illinois actually did some further pension reform last year. During that process that was driven by a task force, benefits for the Tier 2 employees were enhanced as part of that process. Now, at that time, we talked a lot about changes into how monies were pooled and invested for return. That part of the reform expected to save money. This part of the reform with these changes were not anticipated to have this degree of financial impact. This change will increase the village's contribution by somewhere around $400,000 in 2021. The last change of demographic changes is a component that we generally expect to go up and down in various years. While the significant increase in the required contribution in 2021 was not fully expected, it is, however, consistent with the recent history of significant increases. So pension costs, our required contribution to these funds, have increased by over 65% between 2015 and 2020 this year. During that same time, our total village expenses in the general fund have increased by less than 6%. And that 6% total actually is inclusive of the public safety pension. So really, it is very clear the number one driver of expense increases is required contributions to public safety pension. I want to take a minute in this time to talk about the difference between the financial impacts and the experience of our valued employees, and sometimes people can get a confused message here. These negative financial impacts are part of a system that the state has put in place for the entire state, and sometimes they have some pretty challenging financial impacts. The employees that we have working in the police and fire department and the work that they do is nothing short of phenomenal. They are valued employees, and this issue does not reflect how we value them as people and as coworkers and the services they provide for this community. So I just wanted to make that clear. Sometimes that can be a little confusing. Challenging in the financial side, very rewarding and dedicated group. So tonight's presentation focused on these two key issues, continued revenue shortfall and increasing pension contribution expenses. At our next LRP meeting, staff will present strategies and solutions designed to address these two issues, particularly in 2021, but to continue to position us for long-term sustainability. Now tonight really was about staff presenting, but it really is also an opportunity to make sure that members of the council are on the same page with staff and what we presented, and we're happy to answer any questions the council may have or take any questions and comments the public may have. This venue makes it a little challenging, but due to the COVID restrictions, we really weren't set up to operate in the more relaxed environment over the committee. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Dave. And the restrictions are what they are, and we'll make the best of it. But thank you for the presentation. I think it's important to note that there is some positive there. There's some rays of hope. Expense reductions nearly double from what were anticipated. And there's still the possibility of CARES Act funding coming from DuPage County that was approved from the federal government as part of the stimulus package. So hopefully the true financial impact will be a little bit less than we're even showing now. I want to underline the idea that these really are reserves coming from the capital and major buildings funds. Now, these are funds that were transferred into those, into those accounts with the idea that we were going to spend it on investment in our community, and now that's being used for operations. So I don't want to give anybody the idea that because we have the same general fund balance of $20.6 million that we started the year with, that somehow we were able to weather this without having to spend our reserves. That's exactly what we're doing. And obviously the 2021 projected revenue is a cause for concern. Mm-hmm. There will be some folks out there that want to talk about cutting, and obviously, with the expense reductions that we've had, we've done a lot of that. There are positions that are going unfilled and a lot of other measures that we're taking. But I would encourage folks to recall that we are largely a person-driven organization. Our personnel costs are really what dominates our budget. So if you want us to cut, let us know what services you'd like to see reduced or eliminated. That's everything from investing in our capital infrastructure, like we're seeing for possibly next week. That's 911 response not being as fast as it used to be. Your street not getting plowed as quickly this winter. The list goes on and on. So I encourage folks to take a holistic view on all this. I know everyone on the council does, and I hope that you'll keep all of these things in mind when we're discussing the long-range plan and the budget later on this year. I also want to highlight some of the public safety pensions, because Manager Fieldman is right. Sometimes the message can get lost or confused. Let's be very clear. Our first responders earn every benefit they get. They put their lives on the line for us every day, and all of us would do well to remember that. And not only that, they pay into these pensions themselves. A bit of over 9% of their own salaries go into the pension fund every year as well. I also think it's important to note that some of the changes that were made recently that Manager Fieldman talked about were in order to try to avoid Social Security liability. contributions that would have to be made to that. So it's important to recall that these folks, yes, they get a pension. Yes, they earn it, but they also, for the years that they're working for the Village of Downers Grove, do not get Social Security benefits. So let's keep that in mind as well. With that, I'll go ahead and stop and see if there are any comments or questions from any of my colleagues. Commissioner Gray.
Thank you very much. Dave, I just wanted to kind of point out one thing, that when I looked at the updated long-range plan, I think it's a testament for anyone that has seen the numbers. We've all had a chance to dive into the numbers. One of the things that jumps out that I believe is a testament to the village and how hard the staff works is when my eyes came down to page 6 and we got to the general fund balance. When you get to that number, you realize what has to be done in-house here to make that happen and to be back at a place from a financial perspective to even be where we are. And so one, I just want to take a moment to commend staff for getting us to a place where we can even see this number. I think that is so significant. A couple of quick questions. One was, with the CARES Act funding that's listed that we might see, is there a designation, when we do see that come back to us, is there a designation for where that needs to go or to be allocated within our funds? So that's the first question.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Commissioner Gray. The CARES Act funding, this is the federal legislation where the money was provided directly to DuPage County. DuPage County has worked with municipalities in order to provide funding on a per capita basis for all municipalities in the county. So thank you to DuPage County for doing that. Under the program, which I believe was approved by the county today, this morning, Downers Grove could be eligible for up to $2.5 million in expense reimbursement for qualifying expenses. It's clear that we will be able to obtain at least $1.5 million of that pretty easily based on what we know. Hopefully be able to reach our full allotment of $2.5 million through the balance of the year. As we receive those funds, they will be placed into the general fund because that is where the qualifying expenses have been incurred. So that will go right to this deficit line shown here. For every dollar we receive in CARES funding through the county, that deficit number will be reduced by that same amount in the general fund, sir.
Okay. Thank you. And then the last two questions really quickly. I'm not sure if we are there yet, but two things. In the retail, you see the retail numbers that are coming out. Looking at trying to find that glass half full kind of thing, when you see the 20,000 to 25,000 closures that are slated for the rest of the year, have we seen any kind of, I keep asking the question over and over again because I'm hoping, fingers crossed, any positive signs in that area? And then what explains, do we have any explanation to why on the housing side we've still seen such strong numbers?
Now let's take the retail side first. First of all, the businesses in Downers Grove have done a phenomenal job of performing in some very, very tough environment, tough and necessary environment to provide for public health and safety. We thought that sales tax performance in April could be down as much as 50%. And it turned out to be about 32%. So that's really strong performance. In the retail side, these numbers don't capture online sales taxes yet, and clearly there was a trend before we went into the pandemic, and it was exacerbated during the pandemic of shifting to online sales. Beginning with sales in July, so this month, the state program for online sales taxes that was put in place last year will kick in, which means we will start to see how much local tax revenue from online sales will be collected here locally. We will get that information starting probably in October. And you may recall when we put together the 2020 budget, we created awareness of this, but we did not count on any of that money. It is our hope that you see lots of online purchases being delivered throughout Downers Grove. That tax is based on primarily on who ordered it and where they live, so we're hopeful that there might be some silver lining there as we get that information as well. So on the housing market side, we've been tracking, and I want to thank Dan Carlson for putting that data in as an appendix in that report. Thank you, Dan. The housing market appears really strong, and really what looks like it happened is the normal spring rush for sales, listings, and purchases has been pushed back a couple of months. Anecdotally, I've heard from a couple of agents that there's a strong push for current City of Chicago residents to look for suburban houses, provide perhaps a little different environment, especially in the Phase 4 Restore plan. So anecdotally, we're hearing young families looking to move out to our area more quickly, prompted by the current situation. If we want any further detail on what's driving the good performance in the housing market, we, meaning Dan, and probably Michael Casa, will help us out. We can look into that.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Cullivan?
Just to follow on, related to that, it would really be interesting to see how those numbers increased year over year, because it looked like a pretty steep increase to me in people selling their houses. Impressed and surprised that the pricing held up so nicely. I guess my other comments is that if you watch this closely, you may know a lot about our budget. If you watch it loosely, you may know that we have reduced staff over the years, some 70.4 full-time equivalents. So we've operated as a lean organization. We've always kept frugal about this. So when we talk about possible cuts, as Mayor Pro Tem said, we don't have excess fat to cut out of our headcount. And this will be a completely open process. After we do long-range plan, we'll move into the budget process, and people watching on TV and the people here will help us make those decisions as to what are the service levels. Also, we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty here. We didn't know the way it was going to turn out. It was very scary 2 or 3 months ago. It's great that the numbers are doing better. We do have an $821,000 shortfall in sales tax, so please shop locally. That's why we keep asking about that. Our businesses need that, and if you divide that number by the average sales tax, you realize just how much revenue has been lost to those businesses and how devastating and difficult it is. And then really impressed and pleased that we're not cutting into our general reserve fund. And I would imagine that will help with our bond rating to keep a big solid reserve like that.
Yes, sir.
Which affects our future borrowing and saves us a lot of money.
That's correct. It's a good measure of financial strength is how well you manage your reserves, and do you use them properly when you need to. And I think we've been doing just that. I'm sure the rating agencies, as we return back to normal in coming years, will take note of how well this village, as a council and staff team, has managed that. I will take this opportunity to just put a finer point on what really put us in that position, because Commissioner Gray mentioned it as well. Really, our fund balance in the general fund and how that's been managed has been a 10 or 15-year journey of multiple councils and multiple staff teams to put us in that position. In the last couple of years, as we've been dealing with and preparing for facilities-related issues, this council and the previous council saw fit to save up money as we made those decisions. Now, that's great. Now, we had money, sort of extra reserves, if you will. We intended to use it as a down payment on new facilities. But it was because of the forethought and planning of this council, I believe Commissioner Earl mentioned that, was what started it, was let's save some money as we went. Those are not technically reserves, but they are a reserve built up for a purpose that really helped us and put us in a great position to respond to this pandemic.
And you got a lot of those numbers because you came in better than the budget amount.
Yes, we've a lot of great staff performance as well. So we really are, through a 10, 15-year journey, positioned very well to handle this. And there are other very strong communities throughout the Chicago area that manage their finances very well also, and we're not in as great a position as we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Earl?
Just a quick comment. Thank you to you all for everything you've done, all of the staff. Thanks for continuing to crunch the numbers, because as soon as something new comes out, I know you guys are churning it and quickly getting us the information just as fast as possible, and it's always accurate, so thank you so much. Also, Dave, I've watched you your whole career here in Downers Grove, and we wouldn't be in this position if it wouldn't have been for you. So your leadership has really meant the world to this town, and I want to thank you for it.
Thank you very much. And so now it would be appropriate for me to also pass along some accolades to Dan and Josh, who's here tonight, who's worked on this plan, but also Judy and Carol and Robin, who really really do the work behind the scenes, and of course Mr. Baker, who has been steady here for almost, my gosh, 20 years as a budget expert, so thank you very much. We look forward to presenting some ideas for the council to consider for responses to these challenging times. We should have that ready for you the first meeting in August, and that's really when the policy making that Commissioner Colvani was talking about really kicks off some of the issues that Mayor Pro Tem Jose would bring forth. So we'll roll up our sleeves and we'll be ready to start making the plans to address it.
Thank you, Dave. Anything else from the council? Anyone from the public wish to ask any questions, make any comments? All right, I'll just close by saying thank you again to staff. You've been on top of this from the beginning, and I know it's been incredibly difficult. But as Commissioner Earl said, you've done a wonderful job, top to bottom. So
Thank you. I'll pass it along. That ends my manager's report tonight, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Before we go any farther, we've covered quite a bit, and I know folks are, or at least I hope folks are watching online, and may have a few public comments. Mike, have we received anything else?
No additional comments.
All right. Anything else here in the chamber? All right. That brings us to council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the council to report out on their various liaison assignments or other happenings in the community. I'll start tonight to my left, Commissioner Gray.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to say to our community, I think we've done an amazing job of trying to stay safe under the current conditions, and I just want to continue to reiterate that message. We seem like the finish line for what we're trying to do seems so far away, but I think it's a day-by-day thing, and so please, if everyone could continue to stay safe, stay masked, wash your hands, and social distance, I think day by day we get closer to where we want to be. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Earl.
Yes, I'm just would hope that everyone out there is still wearing their masks if they can. There are some people who just can't wear masks. People with asthma or lung problems, some heart problems, also some people who have mental health challenges are unable to wear masks. And we should try within ourselves not to aggravate their situations any worse than they already are. Many of them feel self-conscious walking around without them. It's not always a personal choice, and to just try to remember that there are other reasons that people don't wear masks. Please, if you can, you're keeping everyone as safe as possible if you do wear them. But if you're seeing somebody pull down their mask and have to use their asthma inhaler and they get yelled at in the grocery store, that's just uncalled for. You need to check yourself too. So the best we can do is try to keep everybody's needs in mind and to do what you can to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Colvani.
I said my piece about sales tax, so there was a post we put on Facebook, so if you want to look at that. Also, this long-range plan is on our website, and then also on behalf of the Downers Grove Historical Society, we have an event coming up on July 25th where Dr. Floyd Meisner has been awarded the Montrue Dunham Award, so you can go to our Facebook page or our website. I'm not sure how many tickets we have left. It's obviously limited seating because of social distancing. Okay, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit.
I'm just going to be repetitive. Continue to wear your mask if you can, socially distance, and be kind.
Thank you. Commissioner Walz.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The school supply drive benefiting Hope's Front Door is still going on from now until August 10th. You can drop off any of those supplies at Evelyn Jane Boutique. If you go to tinyurl.com/HFD as in dog school supplies, think backpacks, binders, pencils, but everything is on that Amazon wish list. And lastly, I'm really glad I'm going to be kind of repetitive, but not too repetitive, being the last one tonight. COVID-19 has given each and every town in this country several predicaments that we need to solve. Each body of local government in Downers Grove is doing their best to solve these and to come up with the best plans for these less than ideal scenarios, coupled with the guidelines and regulations from the state and federal government. There are frequently moving and changing pieces. I would never suggest that anyone stop asking questions or having conversations. I simply ask that you keep the things I just mentioned in the back of your mind. We all talk a lot about showing empathy and showing kindness. Empathy, which by definition is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. Put yourself in other people's shoes. Put yourself in our shoes and other boards in our town. No local decision maker has an easy task before them. Continue to show empathy and kindness when engaging in these difficult discussions that continue to come before our community. We're all working incredibly hard up here, and unfortunately that means that not everyone is going to be happy with the results of anything that comes out, but please know that each body of local government is doing their best in these difficult times for our community. That's all, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Commissioner. One of the numbers that was included in the long-range planning report but wasn't talked about was the fact that we've got about an 11% unemployment rate currently in the village of Downers Grove. So obviously there are still a lot of people out there hurting. You put that together with folks that are sick or worried about getting sick, worried about whether or not they can wear their masks and whether they can distance properly, and obviously there's still a lot of tension out there. So I just wanted to say to folks, continue to show people a little bit of grace. It's still a tough time, even though we're starting to reopen and slowly inching back toward normal. But it's still a time to make sure you keep your temper in check and show folks just that little bit of kindness. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.